Hi, this is David Odell with Odell Complete Concrete. I'm on a new project. This is a driveway repair in the city of Bullhead, Arizona. I got James with me, my new guy, and my brother Doug. You can see how this driveway has collapsed. It's about 4 inches below the curb and gutter there. And we don't know what the cause of that is, but we think some kind of water erosion possibly is underground here because they did a repair in this area. If you look at along the back side of the curb, you'll see that saw cut in replacement of some concrete where there was a water main leak. And what happened, we believe, from the looks of it, is the water main that broke under the street there was shot water out between the crack of the driveway and the back of curb. It blasted out the sand, and then it left a big void underneath the driveway. So as soon as someone drove over it with anything heavy, they just dropped it down. That area right there is where the new pipe is probably run across to those meters. Here's another box here, and I was just kind of in a discovery mode of what was going on here. So I opened this to see if there was a meter in there, and it was just a pipe, a cut-off pipe. Looks like they had abandoned a water meter here at one point, and the valve's still in there. So I didn't know if that was live or not behind the valve. Right here, I'm going to put the breaker attachment on. I'm going to start breaking the concrete. As I break it up, I'll be able to possibly find out what caused this driveway to settle so much. And I looked around the neighborhood to see if this was a common occurrence in here, and I really didn't see anything quite like this. And so this is the only one that really dropped this far down. And where I'm starting is I selected this point to start breaking because it was already cracked up so much. I knew it would be an easy place to start flipping pieces. So my plan is to try to break an area of concrete all the way across the driveway to where we're going to be stopping. That way it's not bound in there anymore. Then I can really start flipping chunks out of here. So now that I broke all the way to the asphalt across, you can see I'm breaking some bigger sections out at this point. Here's a look underneath that sunken area of the driveway at the back of the curb. You can see the hollow void going under the curb, and that's settling as well, but it is like 6 to 8 inch concrete, so it's holding up better than the driveway did because it was only 4 inches. So this curb is actually bridging a void underneath it at this point. But you can see it is settling by the compression cracks. So the concrete's bound in there, so it's having a hard time pushing down into the void area, but it will eventually. It's just a matter of time before that concrete can't bridge it anymore. Now, if that curb and gutter there had some number 5 rebar or maybe a couple of number 4s running through it, it might bridge it indefinitely. And even this driveway, if it had some steel in it, it may have bridged those voids for a lot longer time. You would have just had a hollow cavity. Great for the critter population too. So we're only taking out three sections of this driveway the way they had it jointed out. And we didn't really have to do any saw cutting because these cracks on these joints went all the way through. So we were able to break the concrete out clean against the joint pattern I laid out. So that's the first 2 sections of concrete broken out. I'm going to be taking 3 loads in this dump trailer. We don't have to go far with it, so there's no need to overload it. We'll just make a few round trips. We could have did it in 2 trips with a nice load, but the distance we're traveling is not far, so we just kept it nice and light, make quick round trips. The concrete's going to go up here to S&S Concrete, and they're going to crush it and recycle it for someone to use for a good base. These houses right here are all on the river on this side of the street. They back up to the river, so each one of these houses have their own dock. Okay, right along the existing where we're going to stop and pour the new concrete against, I was just showing James real quick how we're going to clean that edge up because that was just a natural break in the concrete that we broke to and removed. So it was pretty irregular. We had a lot of concrete sticking out. It wasn't a real straight vertical edge to pour against. So we're going to clean it up with that saw. Right here, I was a little scared breaking the concrete over this saw cut trench replace. So I figured there's probably a pipe below there. and I'm sure that there is just that it's buried deep enough that I could get the concrete out without breaking the pipe again. So I'm sure it had broke before, and that's why they had to do that. And they poured it in there a lot thicker this time. That little patch back they did was about 6 to 8 inches thick. At this point, I'm still assuming that that valve might be live on the other side of it, even though they abandoned a meter. So I'm kind of being careful around this. And as I remove this concrete, there's a big void underneath this as well. Another water leak, most likely, around this meter. That's probably why it got relocated. But we also found the plastic pipe coming up that was poured into the concrete during the original driveway installation when these houses were new. And inside that pipe, we come to find out as we continue removing the concrete, there was actually some wires in it. We think it's cable, internet wires, possibly old irrigation control wires. We're not real sure, but we just left them buried underground, disturbed, you might say, but an unusual place to find them. So now that we have the meter box out of there, I'm going to save that and use it somewhere at some point. So I'll take that box home with me. And if the box isn't salvageable, I'll end up just using the steel lid and then cast my own box if need be, if I ever need an enclosure. Now, if you notice how I'm demoing this, I left a section of that really thick concrete along the back of curb. And that's my ramp getting out of the hole. It also protects the curb from getting damaged and the street. So that'll be the last piece to come out when we get down to the end. So minimal trips over that curb, in other words, with the tractor. So we know it's hollow underneath there. So we don't want to be the guys to drive it down and then having to replace it. We'll wait for someone else to drive that curb and gutter down. Because this house is on a cul-de-sac and this is the end of the road, even though this road circles around, it really is not a cul-de-sac per se, because you can actually wrap around on it. But this would be a good place for a trash truck to make a U-turn to pull up on. So that's pretty good weight there. So that could potentially sink the curb. So this is my second load in the dump trailer. There'll still be one more after this. And we know the concrete, the way the grade is, because it had settled and we had so much erosion here that we know the new concrete's going to go in a lot deeper than the old was put in initially. Or we could bring road base in and pour the concrete thinner. But I decided just to go ahead and pour it full depth along that back of curb. That way that will help bind in that curb from any further damage. This asphalt here along this edge, we didn't get a good clean edge on it. The asphalt's in pretty bad shape, cracking, spalling, the whole works that you typically expect from asphalt. And asphalt in general does not do well in high heat temperatures because it just kind of melts, especially when it's hot and you have traffic on it. It's going to wear a lot quicker than in a colder climate. There's a good look at that curb there, how it was cracked on two sides and settling in the middle. Now here's the final removal of my concrete ramp I left in. So that asphalt edge is property line. So we don't really want to saw cut over and clean up the edge because the asphalt, even if we did saw cut, there's a good chance that it's still not going to be clean because that's how bad that condition of the asphalt is. So we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to just pour into the voids of the asphalt and take a nice straight joint down that asphalt edge, and then we're going to paint it black on the asphalt side of the joint. And then whenever they slurry coat or do anything with the asphalt, they can just go right on over the top and stop it at the joint. And you'll see that as we start the pouring process. So here's James on the compactor. We've been wetting this down pretty good for compaction. This is kind of a sand. Basically, it's a sand base. So it's a great base in itself. Even without compaction, you could just wet it and you're going to get good compaction, really. But we went the extra mile on this and put the compactor on it. And it did drop down, even along that curb. It packed it down pretty tight. So the way this type of base works, because it's not an aggregate, it's a fine aggregate, sand. It's movable, so it can erode very easily. And that we assume that's probably what happened here because it is a fine base aggregate and it was eroded easily and washed out from underneath the concrete, and that's why it settled. Now, if this had been big rock or gravel, it couldn't have washed out through the cracks. But with this type of base, it can wash out. Also, we're doing dowels into the existing because we don't want that level where they marry together to fluctuate in height. So we're going to dowel it in. I cleaned up the edge with the cutter. We'll put 2 dowels on each section all the way around. We won't be doweling that curb because that curb might end up be coming out if it's any more damaged. Using 3/8 rebar here, we're kind of like building a bridge. We're using zip ties, real easy. Anyone can use them. Their first day out, they can be using zip ties as fast as someone that's been using zip ties for 10 years. That's how easy it is to learn this technique. Now, if you're using tie wire pliers, that takes a little more coordination. It's going to take you some more time to learn them. We're putting these about 18-inch centers, and because we're tailgating this, we don't have to drag a hose over it. We're going to go ahead and dobie it up, all the steel, so when we drop it out of the chute, we know the rebar is already up in the middle. Plus, we're really thick, so we can dobie it without a problem. Sometimes I won't dobie it. If I'm just pouring a simple 4-inch, then I won't dobie it because it gets too high to the surface, and then what'll happen is the concrete will crack along the top of every bar. And once that happens, the water gets in there and they rust, and the steel expands, and it actually explodes the concrete off the top. So rebar not in the right place is really worse than no rebar at all. Here's the type of grade stakes I use to hold my screed. These are my favorite. They have some spring-loaded steel that clip onto these stakes, but they have a tendency to move. You can slam this screed down on there, as much as you want. It's not going to get off grade. The springs still slide down on you. So this is what I use. Matter of fact, I've had that happen. It's happened a few times on the spring steel stakes. You have one slide down on a big pour. If you're like 100, say you're 100 by 200 foot pour, and you get one of your bays drop down on you, you don't know it because you're pouring a lot of concrete, and you can have some bad outcomes. So we have them start pouring the concrete out to take a look at it. We added water, of course, because it was a little dry. But you know what I say, you can add water, but you can't take it out. So it's always better to bring concrete drier than wetter because you're stuck. When it's too wet, it is what it is. You got to send it back, lose a bunch of labor hours. Everybody loses. If you bring it stiff, you can add water on site, get it right. So this really only figures about 7 yards of concrete at 4 inches, but since we were doing it so deep, we ended up going 9 yards on this. And this is a 3,000 PSI, 3/4 minus rock. You can see the asphalt here. I was saying earlier how irregular and damaged the asphalt was. So this is where we got to fill in the voids, whatever fell out. And then what we'll do is we'll make a nice straight joint all the way down, paint the concrete black until they do a slurry coat over it all. Now you got the 4-foot magnesium bull float following up behind the screed. Nice thing about using the big rock versus, say, pump mix, the pea gravel, is that when you screed big rock, it stays where you leave it. For pea gravel, you can get a lot more movement on it after you screed. So it's a constant battle on your lay down, getting your elevations right. But big rock, one and done, your elevations are good and they hold. Because the way this driveway is sloped towards the garage, and we're matching the existing concrete, which wasn't really a straight line slope, it was kind of undulating. That's why we routed it that way for one reason, and that's why also we're both floating it that same direction, because you really can't get a perfectly straight grade slope on this because we're matching existing. So we have to go with the contours that were dealt us and follow it. Here's Louise, best finisher in Bullhead right now. Notice how he's using that magnesium float. That's what you want out. When it's 110 or 100 above 100 degrees, you want magnesium floats. Try to seal it up as quickly as possible because you don't know if you're going to have another time to hit it. You might have to broom that hand float. You just never know. You got to be one step ahead of the game all the time. Your first lay down out here could be your last lay down. So it's got to be close every step of the way. He's really working that into the asphalt. That asphalt's kind of heaved over the years, and then through the multiple layers of slurry coats and stuff, it's kind of came up a bit. So we're not exactly matching that. It was just god awful basically to try to match. So we put our concrete in flat in hopes that maybe they'll tear that asphalt out and replace it on a straight line. Here's your dry line snapping off of your existing joints. We do have to match those because since we're doweled into the existing and we don't have an expansion joint in between the new and old, those cracks on the existing will reflect through whatever you put over here because they're doweled and they're touching. Now, if we had felt and we didn't dowel it, we wouldn't have to match the joints necessarily. Visually, it looks better to match them, but it's not necessary. If you have expansion felt and no dowels, it can move independently from one another. But I don't want it to do that, so these are joined. Here's James running that walking edger on a radius. Not an easy task on a tight radius. We're using that Arizona joiner. It's the big 3/4 inch radius, 3/4 inch wide. Real easy one to use. Notice all those tire marks from my tractor, how I consolidated them into 2 locations, right in the first section and the last section. Those are my only pivot points. So when I come back out here to clean up, I'll just pressure wash them off. Here's a little Fresno action. I got Big Blue, which is twice the weight and harder to handle because it's on a rocker. So Luis chose to use this unit, which is fine by me because we had this thing bowl floated 2 or 3 times, so we knew it was as good as it was going to get. No need in throwing another heavy tool on it if you don't have to. And I'm down right here trying to straighten this joint up where we're touching the asphalt. That line's kind of crucial because if they ever do the asphalt, I want it to be a straight edge they come back against. So that's one of those things, pea gravel versus big rock joining. Joining pea gravel is a lot easier than joining big rock, especially if you're cutting late. If you're cutting late in big rock, good luck. You're going to need a chisel and a sledgehammer to do it. A lot of cream from somewhere. Pea gravel, on the other hand, you could probably knock them in just about at any time. So what we're trying to pull off here is just basically walking tools right to the broom. However, it didn't work out quite that well because we had a lot of rocks rolling and popping on us behind the funny trowel. So I had to get out there on knee boards and really work it hard and tight to get those rocks to stop popping. I was thinking maybe I could have used a roller tamp or maybe a jitterbug or a vibratory screed. You know, one of these things to knock those rocks down a little bit. They have a little more cream on top, and then I wouldn't have had the rocks popping. But we got through this. I mean, there is some advantages to having the rocks really near the surface. Rock is harder than the cream of concrete, so you're going to have a harder surface, but it's going to be harder to lay down and get the nicer finish. Here's another technique to edging on a straight edge. When you don't have one, you just put your 20x4 sideways, run your edger along it, and at least you know 20 inches of it straight. So there's Luis. He sprayed a little water on it to bring that broom across. And it's kind of crucial, the brooming, because that's your finish. Whoever's brooming is putting the finish on it that's going to be there for 20 to 50 years. So the amount of water that you put is important. If you put too much, you're weaken the surface. If you don't put enough, the broom chatters. So it's really, it's all science, you know. It's all based on science, I got to tell you. I would have liked to put some more joints in this, because they got this original driveway spaced, about 10 foot, 10 by 12s or so. And I would have liked to see more like 8 by 8s. But I thought, well, you know what? That original driveway's been here for about 20 years and it has no steel in it. It's only 4 inches, in some places 2.5. It did pretty good. I'm going 6 to 8, and now I've got steel in it. I guess 10 by 12s isn't that bad after all. So we retroweled a couple spots where I didn't like the broom. We retroweled it, rebroomed it. This is kind of your finished product right here. And you can see it's kind of ugly where it touches that asphalt. But I got some nice end photos I'll show you when I came back and I painted it up nice and black to match that asphalt. Look at that little joint off of that wing. That's an important one right there. That's one that I can guarantee will crack. Here's your curing compound. This curing compound is very important. All right, guys, this is kind of a final pick, and you can see that concrete how it oozed out into that asphalt area. But stay tuned for a moment, and I'm going to show you how it looks after I paint it on the next day. Here's the next day, and look how fast this concrete's curing out. It's almost whited out overnight, just with curing compound. Nobody here to wet it overnight. And then here's after I painted this edge. These are just still photos too that we just kind of panned through it and brought it in tight so you get a close-up on how natural that looks. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Share this with somebody that needs to know how or what to expect. Have a good day. Bye.